So my name's Christina Hildebrand. I did speak yesterday on vaccines and PCR tests. I'm going to switch modes completely today and talk about food. And people ask, well, what do you, how come you have the right to talk about food? I think anyone does, but about 15 years ago, I started a food distribution company called Real Food Bay Area. I always in my life have had food as a secondary hobby slash business. So when I lived in New York for 10 years, I had a catering company. I went to the Culinary Institute, learned that, thought about becoming a chef, and decided that wasn't my idea of fun because of the hours. But when I got to California, I thought I ate healthy, and I realized that, healthy eating, I think at that time, is different than from today even. And I look at my childhood, and I also think that we ate differently then. So in my childhood, I realized I grew up eating very little processed food. I grew up in England. My mother's German, cooked all the time. And, it was funny. I think it was probably when I was about 21 years old that I realized that we ate tongue. And I never realized, she always used the German word for it, Zunge, and I knew that that meant tongue, but I never put two and two together that I was actually eating a cow's tongue. And that sounds crazy, but it was like, oh wow, we ate some really crazy things when I was a child. And I look back and I've sort of, in the last, I would say 10 to 15 years since I've had kids, I've kind of gone back to what is food, and food isn't just when I lived in New York by myself, it was, oh, I'm going to eat a salad and I'm healthy, and I drink Diet Coke and that's healthy because it's diet, those types of things. And I think it was once I started having kids and I actually had to cook food for other people and provide food for other people that I really started going down that path. But basically when my daughter was breastfeeding, when I ate any dairy, and this took a long time for me to realize, or not long, but it took about 3 months for me to go through and work out what I was eating that was causing her to spit up. So, I wanted to breastfeed my daughter. I did so, but she would every now and then, more often than not, she would like spit up everything that she'd just eaten. And I was like, this is liquid gold I'm making for you. You shouldn't be spitting it up. But then there would be days where she would go without spitting anything up. And I was just like, it has to be something that I'm eating, that I'm doing to her, that's causing this. And what I worked out was it was corn, both corn and dairy. And so anything with high fructose corn syrup. So, I'm probably much more now organically oriented and unprocessed oriented. But for example, we would go out to a restaurant and I would order something and it had been cooked with corn oil. And I was like, what the heck did I just eat? And it was absolutely corn. At that point, I didn't know the difference between GMO and, and sprayed organic, wasn't really concentrating on that. I'm sure if I did it again now, I would look at whether organic corn and corn products had the same effect, and whether it was actually probably a glyphosate intolerance. Dairy, I didn't eat a lot of, but when I ate cheese, she would spit up. And so I went through this diary process of basically documenting everything that I ate the same thing for 5 days in a row that didn't make her spit up. But anyway, so I basically worked out that these were the things that were causing her strife, and I stopped eating them. And that sort of took me on this path where when she turned a year and a half old, we wanted to get her drinking regular milk. And we tried regular milk and she got extremely constipated, extremely just did not do well on it, grumpy, unhappy. We tried goat milk because that was supposed to be closer to real milk. That sort of worked, but didn't really work. And then I started sort of going, I'm a big fan of rabbit holes and I go down them a lot. I went down the rabbit hole of raw milk and realized that, oh, this may be something that is better. She's more likely to tolerate. And she did, and we switched. I then started researching Weston A. Price, which is he was a dentist about 100 years ago, and he researched different tribes throughout the world and how he did it from a dental perspective, but also looked at what they eat, and basically found that most of the the groups of people that lived to ripe old ages ate a lot of fat in their diet, ate a lot of raw foods in their diet, differed from their diet, you know, from where they lived. So Eskimos ate differently from the people in the Andes, from the people in Italy, but found that there were commonalities in food. And so, and raw milk was one of those in some of those and those tribes. And so I got interested in that. I started buying raw milk. In California at the time, there were only 2 raw milk dairies. There are now 5 or 6 raw milk dairies. Different states have different legislation on raw milk. And about a year in, I realized that you could go to Whole Foods at that time and buy raw milk. You can't do that anymore because they stopped doing that. And about a year in, I realized I would have to go to Whole Foods on the day that Claravel milk was delivered, because by the next day it was all gone off the shelves and I needed to feed my child this. And so then I found out that there was a guy that went down to Claravel Dairy every week and you could order from him directly. And this was my introduction to getting food off the grid, basically, and knowing my farmer. And so that happened about 15, well, now probably 12 years ago. And so it happened 15 years ago. 12 years ago, I started Real Food Bay Area because this guy, my source of raw milk, moved to Florida. And so I went to him and I said, I want to take over the company, because he was looking for somebody and I was just very selfish and wanted to continue to get my raw milk. And I took over the company. I knew I didn't want to do the driving. I was happy to manage it. I found a driver and he was willing to drive down to Panoche, which is, or Piscinas, which is in the middle of nowhere, about 3 hours south of the bay. And he was willing to do our deliveries. And so we started off with 3 delivery locations, just raw milk. I expanded to include eggs, and we now, if you go our company, I'm not plugging it, but it's called Real Food Bay Area, and we now deliver to about 30 different locations and do home deliveries. And we have everything from meat to prepared foods to we don't do fruits and vegetables at all. We have done in the past, and it just didn't work out well. But in doing so, I have met a lot of farmers, and I realized the importance of meeting farmers. And so today I wanted to talk about this farm to consumer marketplace for food security. And really what by that I mean, you need to know that food is important to you. We all need it every day. I'll get into water as well a little bit, but we really need to be on top of where we get our food from, making sure that it is healthy, making sure we know where it's coming from. And my question in the last year is, if you no longer had a food supply, your current food supply, and by that I mean your supermarket food supply or your farmer's market food supply, where would you get your food from? And we're going to talk about that today as well. So that's kind of an overview of my background and why I get to talk about this, as well as things like vaccines, which is what I spend my everyday life in, but I do spend my life in this as well. I'm going to start off by talking about a somewhat different topic, but I think it's one that everyone should be aware of, and that is agorism. And so most people don't know what agorism is. I think more people listening today will know what agorism is, but for those of you who don't, it's something that I looked into probably 8 years ago now. I am sort of an early adopter of these types of things. I do a lot of reading. One of my good friends told me, go read the Agorist Primer, and so I did. So what is agorism? Agorism, the goal of agorism is the agora. And in that, it's a society of open marketplace as near to untainted by theft, assault, fraud as humanly attained, is as close to a free society as can be achieved. And a free society is the only one in which each and every one of us can satisfy his or her subjective values without crushing others' values by violence or coercion. That's Samuel Konkin is the person who wrote the Agorist Primer. That comes from that. And this truly is my ideal life. If I had created a world, this is the world I would create. It's one where we all live for ourselves, but we honor the people that live in the same world as us. It has a large portion of voluntarism. We heard someone speak about that yesterday, or not about it, but he mentioned it at the end, where that is truly voluntary exchanges by means of counter economics. And counter economics to me is a gray market. So we have the white market, you know, the regular market, you go to the store, you pay with your cash or your credit card or whatever. The black market is getting, you know, things that are illegal, so drugs, those types of things, that's a black market. This is a gray market. This is a place where you're doing things legally, but you're not doing them as society normally would hold it. And things like that are using things like cryptocurrency to pay, where you're not using a fiat currency, you're not using cash or dollars or euros. The places that I go to when I listen, and these are, somebody asked me the other day on a Q&A, what are the podcasts you listen to? And I couldn't think of them offhand. So I decided to put them down here. But I would recommend, if you're interested in this, if this is sort of speaks to you somewhat, go listen to these people because they really live as much as they can by this. There's the Greater Reset, which is a conference I spoke at last week. It was in opposition to the Great Reset, which is the World Economic Forum. Counter Markets is a written magazine that talks about cryptocurrency and how to create business off the grid. Vin Armani and the Vin Armani show, he no longer has that show, but he interviewed a huge number of people over the course of about 2 years, all that are into agorism and that type of thing. The Last American Vagabond, Ryan Christian, he does a lot of talking about agorism and different agoristic side pieces. James Corbett at the Corbett Report, and the Conscious Resistance, Derek Brose. And so those are the people that I go to. If you want to know more about agorism and voluntarism, those are the people to go to. I wanted to give that as a backdrop to what I'm going to talk about, because I truly believe that we have to get out of the system. And we have to get out of the system as much as each individual person can get out of the system. I personally can't move out of California for the next 6 years because I have kids. So I have to live in California. If it were up to me, I would have left California and I would have gone and had a much more agoristic lifestyle than I currently do. I live in Palo Alto. That's a choice that I make because it's close to my kids' school and I get to walk to school or bike to school with them. You know, those are choices that I make. That means that I don't have a huge garden, but I do more and more have plants outside and garden, you know, grow food. I can look at what I can do, how much of what I do, you know, is ordering from Amazon versus the actual business. How much of it can I do using cryptocurrency versus fiat currency? How much of it do I do directly with the person I'm purchasing from? So going to the farmers markets, you know, I have the luxury of having a small business that provides me most of my food directly from the farmers. But how much are people using our, you know, CSAs, things that do go directly to the farmer, or at least cut out the middleman of a large corporation like Whole Foods or Walmart or Target or, you know, Amazon. Doesn't mean to say I don't purchase, you know, Whole Foods for the things that I do and have Amazon deliver it because it is convenient. So, you know, you have to work out where are the things that are important to you and where can you truly get out of the system and where do you need to stay in the system. And for each of us, that's different in different places. You know, some people homeschool. I personally can't homeschool for various reasons, but I can't do the homeschooling. So I found the best school for my kids, which is a Montessori school where I feel like they're getting that education. For other people, it's getting their kids off the system, off the grid. Healthcare, you know, I do not partake in healthcare unless it's an emergency from a Western medicine perspective. All of those things come into agorism. So I'm going to use that as a backdrop to the rest of my talk to sort of tell you where I'm coming from in this talk. So as I started off with this, food and water are incredibly important to us. Without food, without water, we cannot live. So most people take food and water for granted. I don't. I make sure that my food and water, and I will also say, you know, you can take food and water for granted, but the quality of your food and water is incredibly important. And I certainly don't take the quality of my food and water for granted. Let's get into water to start. I'm not going to focus on this for the rest of the presentation, but I did want to bring it up here. So everybody, you know, most people who are not homeless live somewhere where you turn on the tap. We live in a wonderful country where you turn on the tap and water comes out. That water is not created equal. You really should find out what's in your water. Every water district has to do, I think it's either monthly or quarterly, share what's in your water, what's coming out of your tap. What that includes, you know, what are your lead levels? What are your fluoride levels? So every city in California, San Jose was the last city that came on board, unfortunately, 2 years ago. Every city in California that has over 10,000 spigots has fluoride in the drinking water. That is, you know, a law in California, where me on my Voice for Choice advocacy side, we're constantly trying to get that taken out of the law. But does your water have fluoride in it? If it does, you have to realize that you don't want that in your water. So what are you going to do about it? Also, how many minerals does your water have? Is it high in minerals? Is it low in minerals? Are those minerals good for you? You know, you can get very hard water. Often people put a water softener in to get rid of the hard minerals, because that's better for their house and their plumbing. But actually those minerals, if they're good minerals, are healthy for you. So how do you balance that piece of it? Once you've worked out what is in your water, then you need to work out what you're going to do about it. So a filter is the obvious choice, but what kind of filter? Do you get a countertop filter, like a Brita filter? Brita gets out a lot of the contaminants. It doesn't get out fluoride. So there are filters. I'm gonna say names in this presentation. I am not anything related to them. I don't, you know, these are what I use, so it's my personal experience. But my suggestion to you is to do your own research. So I am not saying that, you know, these are the best ones out there. I'm saying what I use. There's a filter called Clearly Unfiltered that does clear out fluoride. Question, you know, then do you want just your drinking water in your house? So do you want an under sink water filter, like a reverse osmosis filter that will get rid of things like fluoride? Reverse osmosis does take all the minerals out as well. So do you put extra minerals back into it? Those are all questions you have to determine, you know, what's in your water and what are you going to do with it? And then the last one is a whole house filter, which means that also the water you're showering in doesn't contain chloramines and fluoride. But is that excessive? It may be, or you may rent a house where you can't put something like that in. It's incredibly expensive as well, at least the first time when you put it in. So those are all things to think about. But you do need to think about, you know, the water coming out of your tap isn't necessarily healthy water, depending on where you live. You may live where you have a well, in which case you probably are getting clean, clear drinking water out of that well. And then people ask me about bottled water and what do I think about that? So bottled waters absolutely have a varying degree of how good they are. Probably on the bottom of the pile are things like Aquasana and I don't remember what, one of them's Coke, one of them's Pepsi. Those waters, they're reverse osmosis, so they're decent, but they are basically the water that's left over from making Coke and Pepsi and sodas. They're in plastic bottles. Those are things that I don't particularly, you know, there's not much health there. Is that better than drinking, you know, lead-filled tap water? Yes, it is. But there's other things involved. The two, from the perspective of what they have in them, the two that I like are Fiji and Grolsteiner. So Fiji is a flat water, not sparkling water. It has selenium in it, which is great for detoxing aluminum. So if you've had vaccines that contain aluminum, if you drink Fiji water, it actually gets some of that, detoxes it out, not only from vaccines, but from other things that have aluminum in them. Grolsteiner is a sparkling water that has a lot of minerals in it, very, very high mineral content. I will say that I prefer glass bottles over plastic bottles. They are more bulky to carry around. They're annoying, but you know, they don't have the plastic residue. So, you know, all of these things I'm just sharing with you to think about. Think about what is important to you. You have to make your own decisions. So I'm just throwing them out there of things to think about, and you need to work out whether you're okay with what comes out of your tap or whether you're going to do something about it, and whether, if you are going to do something about it, what that something is. So that's water. That's all I'm going to say about water. I'm happy to answer questions at the end about water and my thoughts about it. I'm going to get into food now, because that's a much bigger piece of this puzzle, because we have to acquire food. Water in most people's houses is there. Food we have to go and acquire. So my biggest question for everyone is, do you know where your food comes from? If you don't, that's a problem. The other piece with food, if you eat any processed food, which many of us do, or if you ate any packaged food. So processed is things that are made and put in a package. When I say packaged foods, it's things like sandwiches that are made from unprocessed food to begin with, but are packaged up together. Read the ingredients. If you don't know the ingredients, if there's anything on that list that you don't understand or you don't know, don't buy it. The other questions to ask: is your food, sprayed? Is it GMO? Is it organic? What level of nutrient density does it have? And so within that, my recommendation to people is grow as much food yourself as possible. And people look at me and say, but I don't have any space to grow food. If you look at my outdoor area, I don't have a lot of space. I also have a space, a patio that has basically not much sunlight. Last year, I tried growing some vegetables down there, and most of them failed because they just didn't have enough sunlight. This year, I'm moving everything up onto we have like a balcony, which gets sun all day long. And so our plants are much, much happier there. And so I literally have it's probably 20 feet by 5 feet space. So not a lot of space, but I'm putting in elevated raised beds in there and getting growing. You don't need a lot of space, and I'll show you some pictures of things. You don't need a lot of space to grow food. I was watching a speech or presentation on the Greater Reset, and a woman who lives and breathes this stuff said, your goal should be to be able to provide 50% of the food you eat yourself. And that doesn't mean you yourself necessarily, but it means you and the people that live around you in your community that you're sharing this experience with. And I'll get into that a little bit. My question is, do you know your farmer? And you need to know your farmer, whether you purchase foods at Whole Foods, at a farmer's market, or from a CSA type company or type farm, whether it's company or directly from the farm. You need to know your farmer. You need to interview your farmer, and I'm going to give you questions to ask your farmer. Whole Foods has done a okay job. They have step 1, I think, through step 5. They have very little food that's step 5. Step 5 is what I want to buy. So step 4 is okay, but they have very little food that's step 4. Most of it's 1 through 3. And you go to Whole Foods thinking, oh, at least I'm getting good, organic, wholesome food here. It's not the case for the most part. When you know your farmer, you can either buy directly from your farmer, you can buy through, direct for them to deliver to you, or you go pick up at the farm, or there's things like the farmer's market or CSAs. CSAs are community supporting agriculture. That's, going, and basically what most of them are is vegetable boxes or butcher's boxes that you get whatever is the in season and good for that week gets delivered to somebody's house. There are 10 boxes or 10 bags or 15 bags at that person's house, and you go and pick up your box. You don't have much say over what is included in that box, which is part of why I started my company, because I wanted to be able to buy one steak and one whatever else, and not have to have a minimum or a maximum, or just be given whatever is in season. Although there are some amazing people who cook with whatever's in season, and I admire them. It's not where I can fit into this puzzle. And as I said, you have to work out your own place in this whole puzzle. Eat as much organic food and nutrient dense food as possible. So I'm not going to go into organic food. If you're not aware of that, or you don't eat much organic food, I would recommend, looking into glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is sprayed on most non-organic foods, even on non-GMO foods. So things like wheat, potatoes, and other crops, they use it as a desiccant. So they use it to dry out, to bring all the crop to maturity at the same time, and then dry out the crop. So even if it's not GMO, if it's not organic, you can still have a lot of pesticide residue on those and glyphosate residue on those crops. So don't just take, to me, non-GMO is not good enough, because non-GMO is still sprayed with a huge number of pesticides. The nutrient dense piece is, so even organic food sometimes can be nutrient dense, because they're growing the same crop in the same field every year. And so it's diminishing the soil. The soil is really important. And I will say most organic farmers do crop rotation. They're much more aware of this. So it's not as much of a problem, but the nutrients in our food today are substantially less than the nutrients in food, even 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years. If you go back 40 years, when I said I was a kid, there was no such thing as organic when I was a kid. You bought what you bought in the stores. But I would say most of the food, or much of the food, was grown in a more sustainable, organic way, because that's what was available. These huge pesticides and fertilizers and chemicals didn't come into play until until later than that. Probably when I was teenager-ish was when they sort of came down. And in the last 15 years, we've got this genetically modified food that we really need to be concerned about, because those are heavily, heavily sprayed. So any genetically modified food is sprayed. Those two go together. And then I will say you have to look at what is your diet. So, I personally follow probably a keto, Western A price, paleo sort of combination, because that's what works for me and my family. I drink raw milk. I eat a lot of fat. People look at me and they're like, yeah, right, Christina, because I'm not overweight, and people don't understand. That's something that I've done research into. There are people who are vegetarian and vegan. That's your choice. I'm not, I can't tell you what works for your body, but you have to work out what does work for your body and how you get nutrient dense and organic food within that's healthy, which looks very different. That diet looks very different if you're a vegan versus if you're, you eat keto or Western A price version. And you can be, keto and vegan, I know that, but you're looking at very different if you eat meat versus if you don't eat meat, and if you eat fish or not. I'm going to go back in history, because I think this is where we need to be now. I'm going to go back to the Second World War, when there were victory gardens. And everyone in the US, and I grew up in England, so in England it was much more of a thing in the countryside, was that you grew in any plot of land that was available, you grew vegetables, and you had chickens, and you really did your part to feed yourself. And I just wanted to share these pictures and flyers from the time, because this is where I really think we need to get into to be able to feed ourselves. We cannot be, we can't be reliant on other people to feed us, because they're not going to have the same nutrient density. They're not going to care about organic as much. We really need to do our part. And so, here we have dig for victory, grow your own vegetables. Of course I can. I'm patriotic as I can be, and ration points won't worry me. The one below is a great picture of a chicken yard. So the chickens are in the middle. One side the chickens are on, the other side is growing the crop. And then when it gets harvested, you put your chickens on that side to fertilize it, and you grow on the other side. I think this is fabulous. Somebody pointed that out recently. I was just like, this is a great idea. I personally don't have enough room to do this, but if I did, I would be doing that. In the middle, help feed yourself, make backyards and vacant lots productive, work a garden, raise chicken. Somebody has to raise or pack everything you eat. Do your share. To me, this is the US Department of Agriculture is telling you this. I think I wish they would do this today, because I think we'd be a lot better off. And then the two pictures on the side, this guy's got his in front of his front yard, between the sidewalk and the road, he's growing stuff, using every little piece of land that they can. And I just, this is what excites me. I think this is where we need to go. And I get that not everyone can do this, but can you do your little part? As I said, my balcony that I have is very small, but I want to see, my goal this year is to see how much of our food we can raise. The other key thing for me is And I'll tell you about this. There's a company that I'm a part of that sends me seedlings every month. But the seedlings they've sent me are not seedlings that I particularly like. So we got bok choy, and my kids were like, oh, what are we going to do with bok choy? And we'll eat it, but it's not what I would do. So I've also sat down, and I've sat down with my kids. I think having your kids involved with this, if you have kids or family members, other family members, is really important. But what do we actually eat? Okay, we eat a lot of beans and peas. We like beans and peas. We like corn. We like potatoes. Okay, the carrots, these are things, okay, let's do them. We don't really like bok choy. We're not going to grow any more bok choy. But you need to grow stuff for the sake of growing it for you to eat. So don't grow stuff that you think is cool to grow, but you're not going to actually eat. So next slide. Goes into growing food at home. And as I said, it looks very different. This is not a picture of my patio up in the left side, but it's close to it. You can get a lot in a little space. You can do indoor gardening, which is a new thing. It is probably more expensive, but you can get indoor gardens. They can be basic as this. There's a company called Babylon that basically has indoor computerized growing machines, and most of what they do is not for the home. They go into hospitals and nursing homes and restaurants and do that. But I think it's an amazing concept that you can actually grow your food indoors if you don't have any outdoor space, with growing lamps and things like that. There's a hanging wall here. There's people I sometimes do the deliveries for my business, and I drive to people's homes, and they have these most beautiful raised flower beds in their front yards, and I just look at them going, wow, that's a dream for one day when I have a bigger house I don't even want a bigger house. I want a bigger yard area for me to do it. And then there are people who have chickens. Most places allow chickens. They don't allow roosters because of the noise ordinances, but most cities allow chickens. One of the people I was listening to this said, you can sustain yourself with 6 chickens. That gives you enough eggs for the year, and your vegetable patch. And you should be able to, with that, and the chickens for meat as well, with that, you should be able to have about 50% of your food. Chickens, I think, some people, I was listening to, again, a podcast that this woman said she likes rabbits. I personally have had rabbits as pets, and I could never raise rabbits. They have amazing fertilizer though. So having a pet rabbit run around your garden and, or your house and use the droppings for fertilizer, wonderful. Chickens do a great job fertilizing as well. So it's that symbiotic relationship that you want to get as much as possible out of the small area, that whatever the area is. Maybe you have a huge area. The 2 people that I like for growing food to go to, and again, this is my personal opinion, there's so much out there. The Survival Podcast by Jack Spirko, he literally gives you every which way of growing anything and everything. He also, the other alternative protein wise is fish. So carp you can't eat, but they're great for water systems. That's a piece that I'm not talking about, but there's a whole, runoff water from your roof going into a whole aquatic system where you can have fish, you can create seaweed and algae as fertilizer. I mean, just amazing. When you go down this path, there are some amazing things that you can do. I'm sort of at the very small end of it, but there is definitely much more that people can do. The Grow Network by Marjorie Wildcraft, she also goes into all of that stuff and gives you hints and amazing stuff. And as I mentioned, again, I'm just sharing what I use as sort of a starting point. Planted Places is it's a monthly grow your own helper for food, and they send you 3 or 4 seedlings a month. They're in felt. You get the seedling, you get the soil, and it's all organic. And then you get a felt potting plant that's reusable, and they send you 3 or 4 seedlings a month, and they encourage you to grow. They have a lot more going on that I don't utilize, like yoga classes and cooking classes and how to make smoothies with all the stuff that you're getting. I started using them because I wanted to be inspired. I wanted to keep my inspiration going. And when you have something that's dropped off in your, at your front door every month, you don't have a choice but to plant it. And you really don't want, they've got emails coming out encouraging you with your plants. You really don't want them to die. And so, to me, that helps me be inspired and continue with my outdoor gardening. But, you can, that's just, for me, that's what works. My suggestion is work out what works for you, because you need to be passionate about this. You need to want to do it in order to go anywhere with it. If you're not passionate about this and you don't really want to get inspired and do home growing, don't do it, because you don't want, the worst thing is if you get the plants and they all die, because you're going to feel not very good about it. So you do need to have some passion. The next one, if you're not into growing yourself, that's fine. Look at local farmers. Who are the farmers in your area? So one thing with Real Food Bay Area is we make sure that everything is as local as possible. Now, there are some things that we can't get locally. For example, most of our eggs come from Montana. The reason for that is that we wanted organic, soy-free, and corn-free eggs. We can't find them here in California. We can't find them to the amount that we need. So we go through probably about 100 to 200 dozen a week. There just isn't a farmer. We have one farmer that's local that does do it, but he can only get us 24 dozen a week. So we go where we need to go. I have to say, the people that we use in Montana, if I come back as a chicken in my next life, that's where I want to live, because they have an amazing, amazing barn and outdoor area. They grow all their own food for their chickens. I mean, it's amazing. So, but I know that about my farmers. I've talked to them. I make sure that every farmer that we use at Real Food Bay Area, we have a relationship with. They know us, we know them. The wonderful thing at the beginning of COVID was I knew we had priority with those farmers and we were getting our food for our customers. And so that's also, if you're not using going to the farmer directly, if you're using a CSA, community supporting agriculture, if you're buying directly from the farmer or from someone like us, make sure they know their farmer, make sure they are doing the due diligence for you and that you trust that company completely. Another one that's a competitor of ours, for example, is Good Eggs. I love some of the products they have. Other products that they have, I'm like, oh, you clearly haven't done, you haven't done your research. Another company that I like is Azure Standard. A lot of their stuff is organic, but you have to really, when you go through their website, you have to really look at what is organic and what isn't organic and work it out. But they're up in Oregon, I think it is, Oregon or Washington. But you can buy bulk products from them. They have local drop points. We also deliver for them, but they have a lot of their own produce and product that they farm themselves, all organic. So, getting to know, as I say, getting to know your farmers, even at farmers markets, making sure that you know your farmers at farmers markets. They are more than happy to talk to you. As I said, I've got a list of questions that you should ask them, but find out who they are. Do you like these people? Do they trust themselves? Do the people at the farmers market know what they're talking about? Because they may not be the farmers directly. And then family and friends. So there is a growing community of people that are growing things and having chickens and stuff like that. Who is in your neighborhood that also is doing this? Planting 10 different products is a lot of work. Well, what happens if I plant all the beans for my 10 people or 5 people that I have a garden community with, and they plant the carrots, or the tomatoes, and we share food and we work out within ourselves who's growing what. That is becoming, there are more and more people that are doing this. So find your community, find who it is. Get your friends and family involved. I have this picture of this girl. It's not my kid, but I just looked at it and I was like, we need our children to understand the value of food and that it's not Starbucks, McDonald's, whatever fast food, box cereal, whatever it is. That's not food. Food is this girl holding her carrots, and to get your family and your kids involved in this. Another website that is not currently yet active, should be in the next month, is called Be Plantly. And it is specifically for this. It is bringing people together in your community. You can put on it, or you will be able to put on it, what you're growing, what you have excess of, and find people in your area that are doing the same thing and what they have excess of. And so you can work out, you know, that community piece of it. Questions to ask your farmers. So these are my questions. I'm sure there are many, many more questions, but if I go to a farmer and I want to hear them, these are the questions I ask. And, you know, I have a cutoff that everything has to be organic. But organic doesn't mean to say, you know, it's stamped with the organic label. If I am in a store and I am purchasing product, I want it to be stamped with the label, because then at least I have that lowest end, you know, it is organic. And yes, there's a lot of questions whether, you know, there's drift from other farms and is it really organic, and how nutrient dense those things really are. But at least there's a level of certainty that they've come to if they are able to get that organic certification. Now with your farmer, if you're talking directly to a farmer, so at Real Food Bay Area, most of our farmers are not certified organic, but they follow probably way more extreme organic procedures. And the reason they're not organic is because they're small farms and they can't afford it. So to have that organic label costs a huge amount of money, because you have to pay the inspector to come twice a year or however many times a year. You have to pay for this, you have to pay for that, and it just becomes a real expense. And so many small farmers are not certified organic, but they do practice organic, and much more than that. They go much beyond that. So the questions you need to ask those farmers, you know, if they say they are organic, you know, good to know. But even organic farmers, I have more questions for them as well. So for farmers who grow crops, we'll do crops and animals separately, although they come together. For crops, what crops do you grow and do you rotate them? So a farmer who only grows one crop is not a farmer you want to be a friend of. In order to have soil nutrients, you have to rotate crops. You have to have different crops growing each year in order to get the soil to replenish and have the good microbiome that it needs to give you the nutrients in your food. The nutrients in your food are all dependent on of your vegetables, are all dependent on the soil. Whether they spray, do they spray pesticides, herbicide, you know, what do they use? If they are organic, they need to use all natural. But again, if they're not organic, what are they actually using? Are they spraying at the beginning of the season? You know, are they spraying the soil and then not spraying anything afterwards? Are they using, you know, what pest control measures are they using? What are they're, you know, me in my little area, I've got aphids. So what am I going to do about it? I'm going to go buy some ladybugs. That's what I've done about it. You know, that's mine. But you know, what are these large farms doing? How are they will have pests. Pests are around. So how are they mitigating those pests? How do they fertilize their soil? You know, you have to have some fertilizer unless you have really, really rich soil, which doesn't happen anymore in most places. You know, how do they fertilize their soil? Are they using manure? Are they using chickens? Are they using pigs? Are they using rabbits? You know, what are they doing to fertilize their soil? What certifications do we have? I kind of started with that. You know, are they organic certified? The GMO certification means absolutely nothing to me. It has to be organic or not organic. Some of the biodynamic goes into, but even if you're biodynamic, doesn't mean to say you have to be organic. So you need to, you know, organic to me is kind of the one label that I look for, but there are a lot of farmers, as I said, that are not organic, that are doing more than organic. For seeds, if they are not organic certified, are they using genetically modified seeds? If they are, most likely they're having to use some form of spray. But that's, you know, one of the questions I have. When we go to animal products, you really need to look at how the animals are housed, how they're treated. Are they humanely treated? What are they fed? You know, does their food, for Real Food Bay Area, we try and keep out as much corn and soy, even if it's organic, because there's a lot of corn and soy that has had drift from neighboring fields. And actually most soy on the market is not organic. It's extremely hard to find organic soy. But even those have drift. So for Real Food Bay Area, if they have, we are 100% not soy in feed, and in products. If they have corn in it, we make sure that it is organic. And then how much air and exercise do they get? Are they outside? This is another one. Chickens. The labels on chickens make no sense. Free range doesn't mean free range. Free range means they have a certain amount of size indoors and they have access to outdoors. That means there's a door for them to go outside. Doesn't mean to say they ever go outside or how big the outside is. So again, you need to talk to your farmers about these animals and how they're being housed, how they're being treated. Another one is how they are slaughtered. So most farmers, it is being shown that animals that are treated well in their lifetime actually are much less tense and much less, they're just different when they go into the slaughterhouse. They're not as afraid. They're not as, it's that last few hours is really important. How do your animals do in the slaughterhouse is a question that I ask our meat farmers. And the last one is, I think, really important. Even if you can't go to their farm, even if their farm's 3 hours away, the question you ask is, can I come and visit your farm? Because if the answer is yes, that means they are open to showing you their practices and their farm. And you could show up at any time to look at their farm. If the answer is no, I would not buy from that person, because what do they have to hide? And so, that's one of the key ones. Even if you don't go visit the farm, if you can go visit the farm, go visit the farm. It's an amazing experience to see where your food is grown, the animals that you're getting your food from. I think that's the end of what I have for you. Those are all my tips. But I think, and I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Fantastic. I just feel like I've eaten. I don't know. I feel it's weird. I have this I've been eating well, and I already feel better. I feel more organic just sitting here. But yeah, I'm so in love with this presentation. Besides the logistical complexities of getting food from one place to another and distributing it. Your focus today has been on the quality, and oh goodness, thank you, because it's always slipping, and the government, certifications are always, slipping, and the industry is always trying to water down the certifications. What does USDA's organic really mean? And so it's so good to know that someone like you, in the person of you, is being accountable, being the one to say, I'm going to verify, I'm going to check, I'm going to make sure it's all what you want it to be and nothing else. So we don't have to think about it.
But you do have to think. I'm asking you to think about it.
Oh, of course.
We do. I mean, and that's part of why many of our customers come to us, because they know we've done the job, right? And so if you're in the Bay Area, yes, you have Real Food Bay Area that has done the job for you. If you're anywhere else, you can find people like us. I think ours is somewhat unique because of the scope of vendors that we have, but you can find, pieces of that puzzle that have been done. But it's really important. I mean, I say to our customers, even though we've done it, still look at who these people are that you're buying from, because you want to have that relationship with them.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we won't shortcut. And I'm a food geek, so I'm right with her. I was raised on a raisin farm in the Central Valley of California. Oh, wow. Yeah, back in the late 70s and early 80s, and I know what it looks like to spray pesticides and herbicides. Yeah. And in fact, across the street was a huge peach orchard, and every year a crop duster would come and lay this dark orange blanket. As a kid, I just thought it was the coolest thing to watch. But now I think, oh my God. So the point I try to make to people is that the application of these sprays is not done delicately. No. It's not done just enough to get by. They're relatively inexpensive, so they're just piled on.
Yeah.
And you can taste them.
Mm-hmm.
You can taste them.
Yeah.
It makes food bitter. So thank you again for your presentation. I will make a small correction to the fluoridation in California. Yes. So it turns out that yes, there is a law on the books, often referred to as the fluoride mandate, which states that municipalities with 10,000 or more hookups need to fluoridate their water. But in fact, it's not the case that every city that fits that bill in California has succumbed. And it's actually noteworthy and important to note that, for example, the two largest cities in California that are not fluoridated are Santa Cruz and Santa Barbara. And these communities have avoided fluoridation since the beginning. And it's
I know you're the fluoride expert, so I should have.
well, no, it's fine, because a lot of people think if that's the law, then it must be complied with. But again, fluoride is there's always an exception to the rule. And again, for the people in Santa Cruz and Santa Barbara, I mean, they are so fortunate to just be able to have a Brita filter on their counter and that be good.
Yep.
But for the rest of us, reverse osmosis is definitely the thing. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a link to a website that quickly shows every community in California that is fluoridated. So if your community is not on this list, that means that you are free of fluoride for now. But please don't give up, because if you search right now Santa Cruz and fluoridation, you're going to see a whole the first thing you're going to see is a whole bunch of listing of how fluoridation should be brought to Santa Cruz and how it's such a great thing. And so the people who want to fluoridate your water are constantly at work. So if for some reason, if you're lucky enough to be free of fluoride, don't think that that's going to be the case forever. You need to always fight against it. Yep. Thanks for letting me put that in there.
No, that's good. I know that's your wheelhouse. So
yeah. Clean Water California and Safe Water San Francisco are our campaigns. So thanks for that. And thanks for mentioning it and that the need to filter it out. So, and then I just have to say, guess what? Like 2 nights ago, I was like, am I hearing right? I heard chickens crowing in San Francisco, in the lower Pacific Heights, San Francisco. Like, somebody got a chicken. It's great. Yep. I guess it needs to be, when you said farmer to consumer, I was like thinking Sonoma or wherever, Central Valley, but hey, it could be just.
Go find the chickens. Find out if they've got extra eggs for you.
Exactly. I'll trade my microgreens or whatever I can do on
the
window box. Yeah, it's just, thank you for just like, it's what's possible. Just keep thinking what's possible. Those photographs from the 50s, amazing.
I know, right? I went on that trip, but I was just like, oh, this is what we need to be doing. They did it then. Why not? Why can't we do it now?
Yes. Being responsible personally for your own nourishment. Okay, so question time. Raise your hand by going to the participants tab and
Clint, I noticed that I have a hard time. I don't have a participant tab, so I just wanted to. My suggestion is also if you I don't have a raise hand anywhere. But so the other thing, if you want to put your questions in the chat, if you're not able to do that.
That's true. Yeah, the newest version of Zoom, actually, you'll find your raised hand under a button called reactions at the bottom.
I don't have them there either.
You don't have that either.
Either place. So I think I don't know what version of Zoom I'm on. But.
Well, when you're the other thing is when you're host or co-host.
Maybe I don't have them then anyway. So.
Then you don't have them.
Got it.
Yeah. So but the chat function's fine too. So there's a thanks from Kristen, who says, this was so rich with info. Thank you, Christina. And thank you, Christina, such helpful information from Dawn. And the name of the Felt Seedlings Company?
Yeah, I put that in. It's Planted Places.
Planted Places.
Sorry, Planted Places.
Translation. Okay, so let's see if we've got any raised hands. Somehow people found the raise hand button. I don't see any right away. Someone says, love Claraval. That's the eggs, right?
No, that's raw milk. So there's a question, what does it cost to have chickens? Any idea of costs? So chickens, if you get them, so one thing to note, if you get a small chick, they take about 4 months to start laying, so you don't have eggs immediately. So but there are some people who sell grown chickens, they're moving or stuff like that. Craigslist actually has chickens on it. I don't know, that's a place that I've seen them. But there are other places. The thing, if you're getting chickens from someone else, you just have to be careful because they may have been vaccinated. They may not be organic chickens. So you just want to know where you're getting them from if you're getting larger chickens. But the cost of them is not very expensive. So I don't remember, I don't have an exact cost analysis, but you can buy bulk feed, bulk organic feed that keeps them going. If you have a grass area, that's great because they'll peck or land that you had grown stuff on last year, they'll peck into that, look for worms, things like that. If you just have chickens, some people buy worms as well. But my understanding is, so for the amount of eggs that you get, and if you had bought those eggs in a store, it is less expensive to have the chickens than going to the store and buying them, even organic eggs. Or if you're doing organic versus regular eggs. And the other piece is if you have 6 chickens and you have, you may have lots of extra eggs at certain times of the year, and then you can sell those as well or barter them. So I don't know the exact price. I just know that it is economically, it's worth doing. It's worth the cost to benefit ratio is worth it.
Great, good news. Good news. So that pretty much ends our time. I'll be actually hoping to talk with you, Christina, maybe the Health Freedom Now network of people in the Bay Area. We can extend the reach of some of these farm to consumer through our network. I would love to be able to do that.
Yep.
Well, thanks again, and
Thank
have it. Yeah, you're a true gift. Thank you so much.